Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast. From still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got the good folks over there at More Important Issues joining us today. We got Joe Niblick, the producer. Joe, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing well. You know, it feels like it should be Friday. It's only Tuesday. Long weekend, tough weekend. Great on the front half, a little sorrowful on the latter half. But you know what? We're here. We're ready. Love to be on. Always appreciate it. So,
yeah, man, we're there. And you graduate in a month, right?
I do, man.
Oh gosh,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yep. Next month is graduation month, and that's not an April Fool's prank. So, yeah.
You ready?
Yeah. You kind of hit that point when you're like, everyone's like, how's it feeling? You're like, I mean, you anticipate it for 6 months. So it's here. It's time to hit the next stage of life.
Finish strong, man. You got to finish strong.
Oh, yeah.
Never leave.
There you go.
In the words of Mark Nagy.
Fellow co-host of More Important Issues, repping the Sevierville Golf Club hat, it's Mr. Caleb Mitchell. Caleb, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. You mentioned I'm in a golf mood. I've got one of my favorite Tennessee logos. It's almost Masters time, so I've got my Tennessee Masters gear on. I'm getting ready for that mentally, physically. That's a fun weekend. Speaking of fun weekends, but doing good. I'm with Joe. I'm ready to get to this weekend. This is the Tuesday of all two. This is the Monday, Tuesday type deal.
Getting Caleb Serrata a big time Masters one would be cool.
Yeah, I here's the problem is I want Rory to get one. I love Rory McIlroy, and
feels like a good year for
this
it.
happens every year. Well, that happens every year. That's the problem.
Yeah,
but
also Scotty Scheffler is still existing, and he was top notch again this past week. It's just like is Scotty playing? Then I'm not betting against Scotty.
he's going to end up being minus odds to win 1 year. Yeah, which I mean, like at the rate he's winning, it's going to happen. I'm sure Tiger was at some point to win the Masters.
I think the odds were different.
It feels like it's over with Tiger, right? The Achilles is the latest one. I'm just like, he's got to be it. As unbelievable as he is, like that's just a lot, man. For him to come back from what he did and then Achilles at his age, because what's Tiger now? Is he 40? What is he?
I thought he was like 46.
46.
I might be way wrong.
I'm really not sure.
49.
And
49. He turns 50 this year.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, maybe we get him back later, but I don't know. He's one of those guys that I think he's directly said it. He's not showing up to Augusta unless he feels like he has a chance to win. But I also
I'm glad I
feel
got
like
to see him last year for it.
Yeah.
Because I went to the Masters last year with my dad, and getting to see him do the march. The Tiger March is something that every sports fan should experience at some point in their life, because there's something. It's a tractor beam. Like everyone's locked in, and it's a power walk, man. It's just really hard to explain seeing Tiger Woods walk the course in person. It's a very surreal thing to watch. It's just it was amazing. Like it's just one of the things I hadn't seen in person until last year, and it was unbelievable. And the Masters, 10 out of 10. Like I would highly encourage folks, if you ever get the opportunity, definitely a bucket list thing, and it's pretty amazing. Like the Masters is a pretty amazing deal, and it's fun. Have both of y'all been, or have y'all been, or no?
I've never been.
Okay.
Entering the lottery every year. Maybe I'll get the chance. My favorite Masters tradition is usually the week of. I'll watch the 2019 final round. That is one of there's so many good Tiger memories, but that one's awesome. I just saw, did you all see this the other day? They released a video. It was cut together, but a video of the CBS production truck during the win.
Yeah, I did see
I
that.
haven't seen that.
You got the producer yelling his different, go 9, ready 8, whatever it is. And it gets over to where he's walking to hug his son, and he's in the commentator's ear, and he's like, not a word, shut up. I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that moment's too big to say anything. And it's funny, a lot of people, because there's announcers that can just know how to fill the room and let the moment be the moment. It's funny that there's producers that are just not letting them even begin to encroach on a moment like that. So yeah, that one's awesome. And yeah, that's my favorite Masters tradition as of today.
And we get 11 years to prepare for the retirement of Jim Nantz.
Yeah, that'll be
It's an all-time great move.
We hate him now, though, right? I didn't know he was a Houston alum until Sunday.
He's the one. He can.
I'm out on
He
Nantz.
gets one free pass. You can never make me hate Jim Nantz.
It's an all-time great heat check. Like that kind of. Like, there's nothing anything like it. Like I just 11-year out. Like I'm.
Was that
11 years?
Was that unwarranted? Was he just like, yeah, I think
I'll be out. I don't remember the context, but it's just I love the idea of just like the confidence. Like that's a job stability confidence pull that you just don't get very often. How many people in their line of work can just be like, I'll probably do 11 more and then call it
Does his contract even run that long? Because I mean, if I'm CBS if I'm messing with him, we're like, yeah, we're not going to renew you. Sorry, bud.
Goodness gracious. Final thoughts though. You talked about Houston and Houston alum Jim Nantz here, Joey. What's your final thought here as we put a bow on Tennessee's back-to-back Elite 8 runs here, coming up just short from a Final Four run, running into a 1 seed at the very end, but in back-to-back years. What's your final thought on this year's team though?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for me specifically, being a senior, it's my senior year as well, which sounds like not trying to take anything away, but it's great. I mean, we have some insane moments, some memories, especially that Alabama game. That'll always be a tight memory. The Illinois game, looking at it from that side, not a thing to complain about. Obviously, from a fan perspective, kind of ran into what we saw. All season we kind of talked about it. We talked it on here a couple times. Inconsistencies, looking really hot one game and then not being able to score more than 20, 25 points in the first half of another game. So I mean, I don't think anybody was shocked to see that there was a lull in the first half of that game. So, some battles that you fought, but again, all these seniors building up this team made it feel really special. And even though the run did get cut short, you made another Elite 8. I mean, you made these personalities that will be Tennessee legends forever. I think Zakai Zeigler will go down as one of the most favorited Tennessee basketball players of all time, especially in the last 20, 30 years. So, it's easy to nitpick and say what could have been, but at the end of the day, I think it was a really successful season, and I think that it's one that we're going to remember for a while.
What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, I haven't. We talked about it on Sunday. It's like I'm not ready to recap. I'm still hurting. I'm still very much hurting.
Are you hurt
Sunday.
though? Because it wasn't an upset. It was just they lost to the 1 seed in their bracket. They fell victim to chalk back-to-back years. Like it's just they needed someone to lose in front of them at the very end. Like,
I wish they had mentioned that this Final Four is going to be chalk, and I maybe could have prepared my mind for it. They didn't tell us that. No, it's not. I'm not upset in the sense of you should have won. You should have done this. Rick Barnes should have done this. Chaz should have shot better. Like I'm not in that. I'm just like sadness. Like I wanted a Final Four. I said this on More Important Issues on Thursday, Chase. I wanted Tennessee to beat Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Go to the Final Four, and every time those morons from Kentucky came to Thompson-Boling Arena, they'd have to look up. Maybe some young kid would be there with his dad. He'd go, Dad, I didn't know Tennessee made a Final Four. They must have been in an easy region. How else would they get there? And that dad would have to look his son in the eye and go, no, they beat Kentucky to get there. That's what I wanted, more than anything in the world. And Kentucky didn't stop that, which might hurt more. I don't know.
Well, the sad thing about the Kentucky thing is because that was Tennessee, you could argue was their best game all year. Like that was the best complete game. And you didn't get to enjoy it very long because you immediately go into a game you're not favored in against Houston, who's just like a better version of you. And there's no shame in losing that way. As Caleb zooms in here to an unreal degree.
I like this camera, but it's got this auto zoom function that I'm not a fan of. Yeah, I haven't brought it up yet, Chase, but you mentioned the not getting to enjoy it much. That was a short turnaround.
Yeah.
I guess I just don't notice because Tennessee doesn't play them often, but man, did we get shafted by that Sunday Elite 8. And we played Monday night games at 8 p.m. tip-off. Why can't we do that on Sunday night?
I don't know if it would have mattered. I think Tennessee would have lost to Houston.
Well, that's not the point. that's not the point of this conversation.
You're not ready to have this conversation. Joe is on this. Like, Caleb's not even close to being ready.
I haven't brought it up because I know it doesn't matter. But you just mentioned how we didn't get to enjoy it long. I mean, I'm just saying that's the Thursday, Saturday teams got a full 48 hours.
I just like it just sucks because like the Kentucky game was so good. Like that was so fulfilling. Like that kind of beatdown was just unbelievable. And I think Tennessee deserves all kinds of credit for how they responded and how they were able to get the mug off the back and not getting swept for Zakai. Like that would have been horrific. Like losing to Houston, there's no like, hey, tip your cap. If Zakai went out and Jemai went out going 0 for 3 against Kentucky in their final year and getting eliminated, that would have been just a horrible, horrible way for those guys to go out. So like to avoid that, I think was really great. But I just think I don't know if y'all feel the same, but I think Barnes maximized every last ounce he had out of this team. I never once thought this year that this was the best team in college basketball. I thought they were one of the 8 best teams in college basketball. And I still think that's true at the end of this. Last year hurt. Like the Purdue loss hurt last year where you're like, you're not going to get a player like Dalton ever again. And you felt like, I think Tennessee was one of the 3 best teams in college basketball last year. I think they were the 3rd best team behind Purdue and UConn. Everybody else, I think they would have beaten the tournament. And to not get a Final Four because you got put in the Purdue region, and there's, again, chalk on that side, and that's the only team that I think would have stopped you outside of, obviously, UConn. That one hurt. Like, the last season really, really hurt because I think last year's team was a top 3 team and probably the best team Barnes will have and the best player Barnes will have here at Tennessee. And I don't know. This year I'm like, man, they just made it all work. Like you didn't have Estrella all year. You had limited scholarships. You were super thin. You were running 7-man, 8-man rotations for the majority of the year. I don't know. I just feel like you maximized every last ounce you had out of this year's team and you didn't get upset. You made it to the second weekend and you pushed this team as far as it possibly could go. Like I look at it in terms of just my expectations. Last year, I thought this team could win a title. Like I thought they could be in the national title game. I never thought this team could win a national title or be, I thought they could make the Final Four depending on what their bracket looked like, but it never felt like to me, like when these 4 1 seeds are just, it's just a different tier. Like Florida, Auburn, and it's just.
They beat Auburn a week prior.
Right. But I'm just saying you would have had to beat, in this scenario, like you would have had to beat Houston, then Duke, who they have no answer for Cooper Flag. Like I don't even know. Like, that'd be a Zach Edey 2.0.
Which as good as they looked all year, this is a different Duke team that we've seen the last 2.
Right, but I'm just saying, like you have to really, really put those orange tinted glasses on to be like, I think they would have been fine. But I think they could have kept it moving.
And I'll say this I'm not a Barnes detractor. I'm with you as far as this season goes. I do think Barnes squeezed every ounce out of him. I think as a Tennessee fan and as any sport, I think this goes for any sports fan. You want to have the chance to be there. And Tennessee had the chance to be in a Final Four. Well, if you're in the Final Four, you have a chance to play a national championship. If you have a national, it's easy to get to where you have a chance to win a national title if you're this close. And I think for any sports fan, you just want to get this close. And then after that, it's like, all right, can we get one eventually? And Tennessee's been this close so many times. I mean, they almost went to the Elite 8. They got beat by FAU just a few years ago. So you're this close. When are you going to break through? It wasn't with a once-in-a-generation player with Dalton Connect. When is it going to be? And I think that's where the frustration comes from, and you got to point fingers somewhere, and it's easy to point at the head guy. But I agree with you. Tennessee, I didn't have them as a national championship team this year. I thought they could have been there, and once you're there, you can win it. And they were very close, but maybe not that close when you look at the score. But they felt, especially with the way Adu played last year in the tournament, I thought they had a better chance this year. Like once you got Purdue, I kind of signed it off. Like that's it last year. This year,
I don't know. I still tried to like with Connect where I'm like, if Connect just goes nuclear, like, I don't know, maybe like it's not a great matchup, but I don't know. They played Purdue. What was the final of the first game they played Purdue last year?
I think that one was worse than the Elite 8 game. I think so because we had a few guys foul out in that game.
Yeah, that was
in Maui.
Yeah, in Maui. I just don't remember what the final was on that.
I can't either. I think it got more out of hand because of.
But it was also a different Dalton Like Dalton was not
Absolutely.
who he was by the.
Absolutely.
Everything about the Dalton year is just like it's just lightning in a bottle in terms of like you had maybe like if it wasn't Edey, you had the best player in college basketball last year.
Edey was he was 7'2".
Yeah.
In college basketball, that is a cheat code. He was the best player. Dalton
Connect was a
the
cheat
best
code.
player.
Or it's just like
yeah, but he was having to still play with guys his size and shoot over him and dribble around him. Zach Edey could just stand there.
Right.
And get
two
fouled.
Extremely dominant players in very different fashion. And I don't know. That's what I think about. It's like it doesn't mean it can't happen, but like I just don't think you're going to have a player as good as Dalton Connect again during this era.
Not Rick Barnes won't. Someone on Voluntary Action called in, Chase, and Joey, I don't know if you got to listen to Monday's show. I mentioned this. They called into Voluntary Action during the halftime, and they were mad that Rick Barnes brought Chaz Lanier to Tennessee. Why? Because he wasn't Dalton Connect. Earlier in this call, he recognized that Dalton Connect was a generational talent, which would imply that it will be another generation before you could potentially even see him. Yet a year later, we should have been recruiting a Dalton Connect, which there was not a Dalton Connect. There's not a Dalton Connect in the country right now, in my opinion. Cooper Flagg is the closest thing. And
he's a true freshman blue chip 5-star guy.
And he was going to Duke forever. Yeah. So I don't know. That was a crazy take. I mean, I laughed when I heard that one. These people can't be real. And maybe he was joking. I don't know. I didn't get it.
But I do think there was unfair expectations put on Chaz just to follow in the footsteps of Dalton. It was a bad story. But Chaz played great. Like, I mean, his shots didn't fall down the stretch, but Chaz was great for Tennessee, especially in the second half of the year.
I think he got better during the year.
Yeah, I think so too. This kind of builds off what we were just talking about here, Joey. Like, what should fans expect in 25-26? Because now you have 3 straight Sweet 16s. Barnes is back. 2 straight Elite 8s. You're bringing back some pieces. Like, we'll see who people are just penciling in. I'm like, the portal is great. Like, yeah, it sounds great, but I don't think anybody had Awaka and Adu leaving after last offseason. Like, I don't think that was on the bingo card. So you never know in this era. But let's just say that Akpar is back, that Cade's back, that JP's back, that Bishop's back, and they do land a Gillespie and a McNeely and a couple others, and they fill this thing out with their freshmen they have coming in. Like, do you think it's fair to expect, like, when you're replacing Jemai and the heart and soul of the team and Zakai, that, like, hey, you've made the Sweet 16 3 years in a row. Like, you got to keep this thing humming, or do you think there is a slight step back and fans should just, like, look at next year as more of a rebuild than a retool?
I mean, when you look at it, like, you're right. I mean, you got those 4 returners. The biggest difference, I think, this year it was okay to say, I think, with Rick Barnes' ability to get in the portal, to recruit, freshmen, to be able to build a team. At least last season, you had some fundamental older classmen that really, like, led the locker room and at least were, glue guys, like the people that build one of these teams, even though they might not be the best shooter, the best scorer, the best rebounder, best assist, whatever. Now you really go to the drawing board. I mean, you're kind of just leaning on JP Estrella to be like the guy that's going to run the locker room in a sense of, right? Can Amari Evans come in and as a true freshman be able to play? Yeah, sure. That's great. I don't think that you can hold that to the same standard this year because it's such a depletion of players. So again, Rick Barnes, great talent. I think if anybody can do it, he's probably one of the 5 or 6 coaches in the country that could. I wouldn't sit here being, beat down if you don't make a Sweet 16, don't make an Elite 8. I don't think it's a fair expectation, but why not, right? I mean, I think that there's a talent level there. It's just a matter of if, the puzzle pieces can get put together.
I kind of, you mentioned JP, like, I think Cade's the leader next year. And I think Cade's, like, quietly somebody you have to bring because I think he's the prototypical Barnes guy. And he's defense first, team first, super physical, does all, like, it just, I feel like he's the kind of program guy that you need to make sure doesn't get out of your program, especially with so much turnover. Like, I think fans might be surprised, like, well, what about JP and other? I'm like, Cade to me feels like a glue guy here in this transition from Zakai and Jemai. It's not the same impact, but I do think Cade is probably the best of the young nucleus to keep this thing humming and keep the defense first expectation, the team first expectation, and just like do whatever it is necessary, even if you don't love your role, even if you don't love this, that, and the other. Like, I got to do whatever I got to do for us to win a lot of basketball games. And I it's one I'm watching because it's twofold. Where like I don't think Cade can ever start here because just I don't think the shooting's there. Maybe the shooting does pick up because I just don't think he's an everyday five in the SEC. But I do think he's someone can continually play more and more minutes. The ceiling's not the same as JP. The ceiling's not the same as other guys in this team, but he's still super valuable. And I just think that he does a lot of stuff that don't show up necessarily in the stat sheets that like when you're losing some of these leaders, he just strikes me more as like a glue guy to keep this thing humming. Because if you're going in next year and it's just JP and Cade enters the portal for more playing time somewhere else and it's Felix and Bishop, I mean, that's like you're starting over. Like he can say retool all he wants. Like that's not a retooling. That's a rebuilding. Like you're starting from the ground up with a whole heck of a lot of pieces. And that kind of changes, I think, what's fair in terms of like what this team's really going to look like. I mean, it obviously depends on who they end up landing out of the portal, but I don't know. At a certain point, that's a lot of culture turnover too.
Yeah, no, I mean, he can't. Cade goes in the portal. I mean, I think you're right. I think he maybe needs to be a little bit more vocal in a sense, and he will, right, as you get older and as you grow to a team and connecting with these guys so well. Obviously, with JP out most of the season, like, yeah, he did. He was kind of forced into that role. So I think in the offseason, being the guy that remains, kind of will work with Bishop and Felix to bring the team back together to be that glue guy. And I think he will get a little bit more vocal. You saw it this season, right? I mean, even just the way he handled the press, the way he handled the media, talking to Rick, like just kind of did feel like, especially in the postseason run, just kind of that guy that everyone fell in love with. I know he's kind of gotten all the TikTok edits. Like he's just the guy that all the girls are just now finding out about. So like, yeah, it is this personality.
Some Matt Saracen vibes. Cade
yeah,
Phillips.
Exactly. Like if he's gone, it's I wouldn't feel any better than I do right now, and I already don't feel great. So that's your absolute bare minimum is Rick retaining the guys that you have left.
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, and I think regardless, this is a rebuild year. Now, could this be a very, very quick rebuild that results in something? Absolutely. I mean, I think if Joey said it, if it is anybody, I think Rick Barnes is one of the few that can do it. And I mean, I think history is kind of telling us his ability to adapt. I think if you look before the modern transfer portal era, as we'll refer to it, he failed with transfers. The traditional fifth-year guys that were graduate transfers didn't really bring any meaningful impacts to this team. And then his first true kind of go at it, you get Jordan Gainey and Dalton Connect, and everything really. I mean, those are two incredible transfers to have on the books as far as Tennessee basketball goes. I think losing. I mean, Tennessee put on a full court press as far as PR for Zakai and Jamai, maybe as a, hey, next year's going to be rough. We are losing this many wins. We are losing this many Sweet 16, Elite 8 trips. What they did for this program is, I mean, it's unheard of in Tennessee basketball history, number one. I think they played small roles on some, not small roles because Zakai's Zakai. He's the leading assist guy in SEC history now, but they weren't the front man for any of these teams that were incredibly successful. And so they're going to be kind of in the back of people's mind, but they played massive impacts in some great teams. Losing them, yeah, you're going to need a locker room presence. And I think Cade's definitely going to be one of those guys. I think it's JP too. He seems to be a guy that everybody can kind of rally around. So I think he's going to be a vocal leader in this locker room too. But I mean, Rick Barnes has shown his ability to adapt. I'm curious how new guys can come in. You're going to have at least 3 new starters, new faces on the court minimum. I would think at least. How are they going to play in the system? Is it gonna take months to happen? Does it get figured out by March? What kind of? I mean, I have a ton of questions. I think there's guys in the portal you can go out and be really, really good with, but next year it could be a rough start. I think they could piece it together. I don't know. Maybe they're number 1 for 5 weeks from November to January. Maybe. I don't know. Doubtful.
It could be a
but
2023 Tennessee baseball situation.
Yeah, who knows? I think we will know very little about this basketball team until mid-January.
Switching gears to football, I'm curious. Like I was thinking about this as we do some off-season football stuff here, even with the first scrimmage taking place on Monday night. Dylan Sampson, we'll see where he's ultimately drafted, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. I don't know. It's interesting to see where he might wind up ultimately. But where does I think we're gonna get different answers here with our age gap here with Caleb and I, and then Joey. But where does Dylan Sampson rank all time in for running backs in your fandom history, Caleb, for Tennessee?
I saw this one. I was like, I don't know where to rank him. My first one is going. I mean, it's kind of similar to the Casey Clausen one. It's like a guy I grew up with. I think my number one as a fan is Arian Foster. That was my really. I think we've talked about this on the show. How the best years of being a sports fan, and it's like when you're really young and you're just kind of rooting for your team, and that's it. Those were the Arian Foster years. Alvin Kamara's up there for me. I love Jalen Wright, especially his senior year. Kind of cemented his place up there. I wish we could have gotten more John Kelly Jr. Really only got 1 year of him. So I could be hard to put him too high, but I mean, he's up there. I think Dylan Sampson's probably second for me, honestly, behind Arian Foster. An incredible talent to watch. Even when he made mistakes his freshman year too. I mean, just a lightning rod when he was able to see the ball. Off the top of my head, it might be second in terms of fun seasons I've had watching running back.
That's interesting. I think I'm surprised you didn't throw Montario Hardesty in there because he's kind of a forgotten guy. Oh, is that yours, Joey? Is Montario your number one?
Montario's number one. He's 1-1.
Okay.
Interesting.
That's just
Montario's up there.
It's Caleb's spot of vaguely first real ability to remember Vols memories is playing the old NCAA game and me and my brother playing Nerf ball football in the basement and just sketching plays up as Montario Hardesty. So he's my one for sure.
Montario Hardesty, number one. I always think of the old black uniforms, old ones. It's Montario Hardesty. That's the first person I think of. And he was just shifty. He was different. He was a different kind of back. He just ran differently, and he was elusive. He wasn't super fat. I don't know. There's just something about Montario Hardesty where he's really good, and he doesn't look like he should be this good and this effective. Does that make sense? Oh yeah. No, he was he's not going to rank. It's Joey was the right age for Montario Hardesty to be Montario Hardesty to be 1-1.
Yeah.
The perfect age. As soon as you started saying that, I was had to be when you were young.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Jalen Hurd the biggest what if of all the running backs.
Jalen Hurd, if he doesn't transfer the way he transferred, he's up there for me. But that whole saga just ruins it for me.
And Kamara is just if you put Kamara with the Heupel era, it's just and I think he naturally, there's just something cool. I mean, the smile in the Virginia Tech game, there's just something about Kamara that I think that word's been thrown around, aura. There's some aura around Alvin Kamara. There's just something about him that just kind of stands out where you're he's just cool. He's also one of the best NFL running backs of the last 15 years. That guy's still going. And he's got to be 30, right? He's still having solid years. Alvin Kamara is 30 in running back years is 55. Because how old is Kamara? Yeah, he turned 30 this year.
I was going to say.
But he's a great what if too. And I think of this Heupel era, for me, it's still Jalen Wright. I think the home run hitter and just seeing his evolution, Dylan Sampson was awesome this past year, but I do think Jalen is the heavy hitter, big play threat that is most dangerous in Heupel's scheme. If you had with the light boxes, wide splits, if there's a running back who best fits what Heupel's scheme is trying to do, I still think it's Jalen. I think Jalen's the guy when you get to the second level. And obviously you have that first play of the game against Georgia where he gets to the second level and it's just goodbye, it's over. But he was able to put on muscle while also maintaining his track speed from high school. I don't know. Jalen Wright, he averaged what, 7.5 yards per carry his last year at Tennessee?
Something.
It's just like I don't know. Jalen Wright was just, if he was able to have handled the same kind of workload that Dylan Sampson handled last year, man.
Yeah. Like I when you said Jalen first and how you like in this system, this hypo system, Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Hurd, I would love to see in Josh Heupel's system. You talk about light.
Interesting.
You
I
talk
don't know
about
how
light
in this offense.
I think he would do really, really well with the quick stuff. I think he'd struggle with the deep ball. But I think the quick stuff, and then I think
because he has so accurate. Like interceptions are not a part of it. Like nobody throws picks in this offense. Like it's just one of those. We'll take away the middle of the field. If you're like, it was Joe Milton. You're not throwing in the middle of the field anymore.
His dumb mistakes were few and far between. So like I think he might have some. I don't think his missed throws would end up in DB's hands all that often.
Yeah,
Dobbs.
I don't know though. Like Dobbs was great. I mean,
I think he has the same.
Of who would be the most of previous years? Who would be the best for Heupel's offense that we didn't get to see?
I think he'd extend plays really well. That's where he would bring the most. Like him.
Oh, for sure.
That's where he would live.
It's the thing that we wish Joe Milton did, right? Like Dobbs, like extending plays. Like if you had the Dobbs in you, where it's like that, there's nothing there. Just go. Like you're built literally this exact same size as Cam Newton. Just run. Just run.
Jalen Hurd, though, you talked about light boxes. I would love to see him in this era.
Yeah.
In this offense. And I stand by anybody who told Jalen Hurd he was a wide receiver should be banished from football, maybe this earth. I mean, how can a guy run the football that well and you tell him he's a wide receiver? That blows my mind. And then, like, you're also taking him out of the box where he blocks really well. My favorite one, I mean, again, I wish Jalen Hurd hadn't left. Utah State his freshman year, when that linebacker cheats up into the box and he looks at him and just tells him, come on, as a freshman, as a true freshman. I'm like, yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. And someone told him he was a wide receiver. And
he tried. Travis Smith this year at wide receiver, like had like, oh, look at this freshman. It's like Travis Smith's like, he wants the smoke. He's like, I'm not scared. I played 7A football in Georgia. I was the best receiver in Georgia last year. Like I cannot buy enough Travis Smith Jr. stock. Like TSJ stock. Like it's all bought up. There's nothing available. It's unfortunate for
how
all
many
people
A's
who got
are
on
in
late.
Georgia?
Huh?
How many A's are there in Georgia?
There were 7, and they just dropped the classification, so it's back to 6A.
Is that too many?
They handle it like so. Tennessee, and look, I talked to a lot of Tennessee coaches.
Far too many.
Tennessee doesn't make any sense. Like I have so many issues with the TSSAA where I'm like the 3 and 7 playoff teams where you're getting there like, what are we doing? Like, like it's just I think I saw a 2 and 8 team one year and it's just like, all right, what are we doing?
That's really bad at the 6A level is where that gets really bad.
But it's also like the private schools get to do their own thing and win state titles and just play each other over and over again. I don't know. I would get bored if I was like a Baylor or McAllee player.
Yeah, but they're playing a different game.
Right. Like it's just boring though. It's like every year. It's like,
no, I agree.
How this ends.
It's not high school football. It's a different game they're playing.
But like Alcoa moving up though is interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't blame them. They've been playing in their classification.
I mean, they've won how many in a row? It's double 11, digits, I think now.
11, I think.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like they just, I don't know. It's, well, like Georgia's high school classification, and this, like, I know people's eyes are glazing over here who are not deep into the high school football weeds here of Georgia and Tennessee. But Georgia, like, I went to Parkview where Mike Matthews went, and they're in 6A with everybody else. But when they went on, like, what they do really well is they have all the metro Atlanta schools are in the highest classification. And then they have the big dogs in South Georgia, like Colquitt, Valdosta, Lowndes, and they have their own region within that classification. And it's just like, it's different football. Like it just is. Like it's just different. It's just, I don't know. Like it's just the way they do it and the way they organize and all that kind of stuff. And the GHSA just has it together. And I just feel like I would like to fix some things here at the Tennessee
We
system.
can do a whole episode on TSSAA. I will. Yeah.
It's just a
lot of things. And it's not just classification. It's a lot of things they do wrong.
But the playoff system's probably better this year. They tweaked that a little bit. So can avoid some early matchups. And okay, we'll save that for another program. We'll just
do a solo We Hate You TSSAA
pod. Final thing here. Tennessee baseball, they're playing tonight as we're recording on Tuesday night against Tennessee Tech. Hopefully they are able to, they got their one random Tennessee Tuesday night loss out of the way with ETSU a couple weeks ago, and we don't get that again. But I'm curious, from your vantage point here, Caleb, what do you make of Dalton Bargo's just smashing over the last 2 weeks in SEC play? And then with Gavin Keelan out, is Ariel or Manny the odd man out when Gavin Keelan comes back here sooner rather than later?
I think today I guess let's start with Bargo. He's your DH as of now until kind of proven otherwise. I think he's cemented himself in that spot. I think, was it Saturday's game they had him in left field?
I think
maybe
it was was it Saturday or Sunday?
Nah, I don't. But anyways, I think he's in the lineup.
He was in left field one of those days.
Yeah,
I know that.
I think he's in the lineup from here on out, whether that's in left field or whether that's DHing. I mean, I think there's going to be a spot for him until kind of proven otherwise.
Great story.
Dalton Bargo.
Yeah, like completely could have unraveled. Like he's been in and out of the lineup. He had a rough start to SEC play. And then just like turned on the Jets and like just never gave up, man. Like that dude, he's a battler, man.
Right. And I think too, with there's guys just gunning for your spot. And I think that's similar to is it Manny Marin or is it Ariel Antigua? I think it's right now, like today it's Ariel, but that could change, I think, any day. And if his bat goes quiet, you've got guys with a glove. I mean, it's not his glove, unfortunately, but you also got a hit to be in this lineup on this team. And so I think it's probably Antigua if you ask me today, but I think that could also change kind of as the season unfolds. We're still early.
I think it's Antigua too. And I mean, Manny is a great player. He's only a 2-year guy though, with his birth date. So he's not a 3-year guy, unfortunately. So you do kind of wonder about that. But I mean, Ariel just like that play at short. I don't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, where just that off balance thrower. And I think Tony said it was like one of the best throws he's ever seen or something like that. It's like Ariel is just like, he's the best defender in like all of college baseball, and he can't get on the field because Tennessee's just so loaded and he would start so many other spots. And you forget that he was just a big time recruit that Tennessee kind of lucked into last cycle. And it's just like, it's just hard to keep that guy off the field. Like he's just so good defensively. And it also helps Dean Curley, who I think is more of a natural third baseman than he is a shortstop. So I don't know, Joe, do you agree with Caleb that it seems like he's more just because of what he's so good at short and just having that kind of defensive ace there that you kind of live with the bat coming and going, and you kind of have him be the Cal Stark of this year's team? And you're just like, man, it's just, he's going to save us some games. Like he's going to save runs. He's just too good defensively. And it also helps Dean Curley at third, where I just think he's more natural.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about that play, and it was on Saturday. Tony's saying it was probably the best play he's ever seen. I mean, the draws that you take, obviously with him being the best defensive player on the team, yes, it's streaky on the offensive side, but kind of talking like Dalton, like he started off bad, but he's kind of found himself a little bit, see some flashes where there's an opportunity where he can get hot with the bat. But you've also got the firepower to be able to combat that, right? Like you can't really afford to give up the defensive edge that he brings just because he's at a lull at bats, because you can work with that, right? And obviously, like you said, with Dean Curley being shifted to third, I mean, I think it's pretty much locked in that Antigua gets that over Manny just because how he's able to affect the game defensively. And yes, I mean, I just think from the way it outweighs it, you can't put aside the defensive side of things because you got plenty of bats to make it work.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's not working defensively, that's kind of what you see with like, an ETSU situation where it's, you can't afford to take that off. So yeah, once Keelan's back with that hamstring, I mean, I got our Ariel all day.
I think it's Ariel's job to lose. I think he's just got to hit enough. Like, it doesn't mean he has to be just a big time bat in the middle of the lineup. He doesn't have to make a Hunter Hensley jump throughout the year, but he does have to. And speaking of Hunter Hensley, just quietly doing what he's supposed to be doing in the third hole. Like, we wondered, it's like, can he handle the 3 spot? It's a big jump up for him. It's like, yeah, he's just gonna do great. Like, he's just gonna keep it moving. Like, he's gotten better every single year at the plate at Tennessee. Like, and it feels like it's a quiet. We just accept. Like, I don't know. Because I had questions about Hunter at the 3 hole coming into the year, and I mean, he's just running with it. Like, Hunter's just great. Like, just not missed a beat at all.
I agree for sure. Looking back at the Dalton situation, I mean, we talked about it. I think it might have been the last time I was on. Just him being able to adapt to wherever he's played. Yeah. He's a plug and play guy. He's a chameleon. And he's a team guy. Actually, I had a quote up here. Someone had asked him basically what he learned from last season to transpire towards here, and he said, obviously just controlling what I can control. I can't control if I'm in the lineup or if I'm not in the lineup, if I'm pinch hitting or where I'm playing on the field. Trusting Coach V and trusting my teammates and whoever's in the spot and playing my game and letting my abilities take over. So, I mean, right back to what we said, like, yes, this kid's in college, right? Like, he's going to have moments where he plays like buns and he's going to get really hot, right? But that's that baseline where it's like, if you're just committed to being able to be a team guy and play your position and play it well wherever you get plugged in, that's where I think his long-term success is going to be, just because it just takes reps, it's just, It takes getting older and being in those positions and not being one-sided on any part of the field. And so that's just my 2 cents on that side of it. But yeah.
I love it. Caleb, Joe, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at More Important Issues in Fox Sports Knoxville this week?
Yeah, we'll be back in the studio on Thursday, and we will have our regular scheduled programming on Sunday as well. And we had a really, really great interview lined up for you this week. We had to push it probably till next week, but that means you can go like and subscribe and turn on notifications right now so you don't miss it next week. I can't give away spoilers. Landon would have my head, but I'll give you that much. So make sure you go check it out. We appreciate you having us on, Chase, and appreciate you guys listening. And we'll be back next week on the More Important Issues side.
Absolutely. Caleb, Joey, thank you guys as always, and I'll talk to y'all next week.
Thanks, Chase.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm now joined by a first timer. If you're a Vol fan and you've been watching a lot of Tennessee Vols hoops this year, you've heard Jimmy Dykes here on multiple Tennessee broadcasts. He knows Tennessee hoops well. So I wanted to pick his brain on what this Tennessee hoops season was for Rick Barnes and company. Jimmy, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Chase, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I did a lot of Vol games this year, so that was a fun team to cover.
How many games did you do this year? Do you keep track?
I know what my contract requires me to do, so that I don't keep track of it, but ESPN does. So it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Have you gotten, is there a Knoxville staple for you? Are there certain spots that you have to eat at or visit every time you're here now that you're a consistent returnee?
No, not really. I mean, we love that is it called Market Square area?
Yep.
There's some places down there, and back in the fall when we were there for home football games and those Saturday morning farmers markets down in the square area, those are good times. But we love the Knoxville area and the Smoky Mountains, and a couple of good churches that we've got to be involved in since we've been over there some. So yeah, it's Knoxville's a good second home for us right now, and our daughter loves UT.
I love it. When you think about the season that came to a close and what you saw in the Elite Eight against Houston, in particular, Jimmy, what did you see that gave Tennessee the most amount of trouble, and why they were not able to get the kind of start that they wanted to? Because they played them even in the second half, but the first half was just too much for the Vols to overcome. What did you see?
Well, I think the same thing everybody else saw. I mean, you only scored 15 points, I think it was, in the first half, and they just could not get anything going offensively at all, Chase. And then they couldn't get the defensive stops to run off of their defense and try to get something before Houston got their half-court defense set. So it's just a combination of things, and they had made a lot of shots during that tournament that they missed in that first half. They had some good looks that didn't go in. And when you get to that Sweet 16 Elite Eight game, it's no secret. If you don't play well, you're going to go home. And that's what happened to Tennessee. They did not play well in the first half. They didn't play well enough to win the game in the first half. And they played much better the second half. By then, the game has already been decided. So a heck of a year, though, for Tennessee to get to the Elite Eight again, back-to-back years. And I'm sure Tennessee fans are disappointed that they didn't win that one more game and get to the Final Four for Zakai Zeigler and Meshack and Gainey and those kids that have given so much to that program over the years. But I think if you step back, Vol fans do a month from now, and they realize, man, we were really good this year in basketball, but both men's and women's teams. They had a great run.
When you think, I mean, Gainey's game stood out too, I think, on Sunday. I mean, he was just kind of, I mean, obviously the basically the sixth starter for Tennessee all year long, closing with Tennessee so much down the stretch. I mean, he was 2 for 5 from deep. He drives. He was just so much more confident offensively this year than a year ago, even when the shots weren't falling from deep. What did you see from Gainey throughout the year, where it's like there's so much attention to Jemai and Zakai, and rightfully so. But Gainey was just, I mean, I don't know if Tennessee has an Elite Eight run and has the kind of season they do if Gainey doesn't make the kind of leap that he did this year.
Yeah, he had a great year, and it's pretty well documented that he was their sixth starter. Could have very easily been one of the first 5 guys out there. Offensively, I just think he really progressed this year. Developed his overall game. I thought he was much better off the bounce. I thought he was much better attacking the rim. Those elbow jump shots that he and Lanier thrived off of, he was very consistent with that. So, he's a good example of a kid that transferred up a level in the portal and met the challenge and grew from year to year. So, yeah, he's a big loss to that Tennessee team. And, certainly Zakai is going to get a lot of the attention, and he should. One of the greatest point guards, maybe arguably the best ever played for Tennessee. But the loss of Gainey is just as big. And, for him to have, the unique factor of his dad being the assistant coach, I think that's really cool. So what a great run it was for the Gainey family overall, not just Jordan.
When one of the sad parts, I talked with some folks about this week, Jimmy, is like you have this all-time great program win over Kentucky, right? In the Sweet 16, and Kentucky has beaten you twice, and you're not sure. Like, you're favored, but it's still just like you have to see it because Kentucky has just shot the ball so well against Tennessee this year. And you beat them, and you have one of your best games, maybe your best game of the season on Friday night against the Wildcats, your rival. And you don't really get to enjoy that very much. You have to immediately turn the page to Houston, and obviously it doesn't go your way at all from the get-go. I mean, it's just so hard to think about like how different and how quickly things can change. And I feel bad for this team because the lasting memory is going to be that loss to Houston, which is it's perfectly fine. It was not a it was a situation where you have 4 uniquely dominant number 1 seeds that all made it to the Final Four. Ken Pom obviously loves them and this, that, and the other. But when you look at how Tennessee was able to dominate Kentucky and then to come out the way they did in the first half against Houston, did that surprise you? Was it really just like, hey, it was just the type of team with Houston versus Kentucky, and that's just the way of the game? Like, how would you explain the difference from what you saw from Tennessee on Friday versus what you saw in the first half against Houston on Sunday?
Yeah, that's just that's sports. That's the beauty of the tournament is, just one game to the next, man, things can change quickly, or one half to the next half, things can change on you. But playing Houston is a different animal than playing Kentucky. That's a big difference. Step up in physicality, step up in how old the team was that Houston had. Kentucky was old as well, but Houston's a different breed. You got to remember, Tennessee was the underdog. They weren't expected to win the game.
Yeah.
And no one expected them to look like they did in the first half, but it would have been an upset had they won. The 4 1 seeds advanced for a reason. I think they're the 4 best teams in college basketball this year, and it's played out that way for the first time since I think 2008. So, it's a little bit of a, I don't know, it's not a shame, but I know what you're saying. It'd be nice for the Tennessee players, staff, fans to enjoy that Kentucky win a little bit longer, but you had to get out of your system quick and get on to the next game. So, but that's the magic part of the tournament, man. That's what makes it so special and so unique. But it's never easy, and you got to remember, there's only one team that's going to finish this year on a win. Everybody else is going to finish on a loss. It's just a matter of when that loss happens.
When you think back to the 2024 team versus this 2025 March Madness run, obviously differences with Dalton versus Chaz and company, but they both make it to the Elite Eight. They both run into a buzzsaw top 4 team in Purdue last year and Houston this year. Now that you've seen a full season of both, who do you think was ultimately the better team the last 2 years? Because I've gone back and forth on that a little bit.
I hadn't even thought of it, honestly, Chase. I mean, they're every team every year is different. Even if you return everybody, it's still a different team, different roles, different scenarios you got to work through. The team last year had its own set of challenges, and this year they were down to 7 scholarship guys for a portion of it. So I'm not going to say which team was better than the other. I think they are both maxed out their potential, which is all you can ask for as a coach. Did you get the most out of your guys? And I know Rick Barnes got the most out of his guys last year. He got the most out of that roster he had to work with this year, and that's all you can ask for. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame coach, has solidified himself as the best basketball coach to ever coach at Tennessee, from what he's accomplished to how he's done it. And they're not done. They're active in the portal right now, talking to their staff. I talked to Coach Barnes yesterday. I know how aggressive they are and what they're looking for right now. So it's a great time for Tennessee athletics, as you guys know better than me, between their college football playoff team, their national championship baseball team, their men's and women's basketball team, and Coach Vitello's got that baseball team rolling again. So at the end of the day, man, it's a real blessing, I think, if you're a Volunteer fan right now, to have the success you're having.
Do you think this is Rick Barnes' most impressive coaching job at Tennessee was this season?
No, because he's done a great job in the past. I mean, that Grant Williams Schofield era, man, those guys were good.
Yeah.
It's hard to get deep in the tournament. It's hard to win it, and that's why look at the SEC. They haven't won one as a league since 2012. The Big Ten hasn't won one since the year 2000. So it takes a lot of factors to get to the Final Four and cut down that final net. So. But I know Rick Barnes has not lost any part of his game at all as a head coach. He's probably at the top of his game. He has a great maturity about him. He knows exactly how that program's supposed to be ran. He's got that thing running smoothly. He's got great assistants, the program, the culture, everything's in place. It's not easy to get to that point. It's not easy to keep at that point, but I don't see any signs of Rick Barnes letting up right now.
Did you kind of have that inkling? Because, like you said, Barnes has just, I mean, the NIL era has been great for him. The transfer portal era, older teams, and it feels like a natural fit between Coach Barnes and Tennessee right now. I mean, did you have that kind of, for knowing Rick as long as you have, that like, oh, this people they're just going to look at the age, but they're not really going to, like, they're not looking a little bit deeper here, because it seems like Barnes is more well equipped to handle this than a lot of people may have previously thought. And to your point, like, it just feels like they're going to reload, and there's no, like, hey, we made 3 straight Sweet 16s, 2 straight Elite 8s, but even without Zakai and Jemai and company, we're not planning on rebuilding or like we're reloading here. That, like, we are going to keep banging on the door.
Well, I think Coach Barnes alluded to that he owes it to those former players that came before next year's team to continue to knock on the door and try to go further. Just because you're his age, it doesn't mean that it's a negative at all. If anything else, it's probably a plus, because I think he's got a lot of good godly wisdom about how he handles himself as a person, how he handles that program. He knows exactly the type of person that he's looking for in that portal. They're not going to make any quick knee-jerk reactions. He's going to make sure he gets the type of person, first of all, that fits who they are. And the success that he's had with DK and Lanier, different transfer people, that's a highly coveted spot for transfers to be at right now. Any of those guys that come out of the portal, you have to think that they all think, man, Tennessee would be one of those spots that I'm looking at, because of the success that coach has had, the success of the team, the 20,000 plus they have in Food City Center every night, the massive amount of national TV games. That program's as well equipped as any program out there. So, I think any Vol fans that think that it's probably not Rick Barnes' time right now, I think they're jumping the gun a little bit, because he's not done. I know him well enough to tell you he's not done.
And like the energy, because it's kind of like exciting, right? With the portal era for guys like Rick, where it's like, hey, yeah, this is a challenge. Like, it's something where it's like, I got to figure out what post Zakai world looks like, post Jemai world looks like. And it's kind of, I just feel like, as a serious competitor that Rick is that, like, that's the kind of competition that drives him, where he's like, like you said, like, for the Zakais and Jemais, the world, like, I'm going to reload and I'm going to rise to this challenge. I'm going to see how I can piece together the next Elite 8 team, right?
Well, if you don't have that mentality, you're going to get chewed up.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to last. And I think Rick Barnes knows how that program was built better than any of us. He knows what it takes to get it back to that level it's been the last 2 years, in particular with the Elite Eight runs. So now you just got to sit back if you're a Vol fan and trust who they bring in, and they've identified the right guys. But I think if you're a competitor these days in college basketball as a head coach, you have to be a fierce competitor because there's no time off. I mean, they lost on Sunday, and I believe Monday they had a recruit on campus. So there's no time off for those guys at all right now. And if you're not a massive, massive competitor, then you just don't last. It just gets too hard for you. So that's kind of where the whole world of college basketball is right now. Tennessee's not unique to it. Everybody out there this week is covered up with trying to make roster management decisions. And whoever does it the best will have the best chance and the leg up on folks going in next year.
Final thing, and I'll get you out of here, Jimmy. What are you going to miss most about watching Zakai Zeigler at Tennessee?
I just think the fight and the chip that he played with. I mean, we all know his story. Didn't have any offers and was always undervalued in the recruiting process until one person believed in him and Rick Barnes. So I just think how hard he played, the toughness that he played with, how he went about being a Tennessee volunteer every day, not just in games, but in practices, how he led that locker room, his voice, his relationship with Coach Barnes, that point guard head coach relationship is critical. And I think he and Barnes probably knocked that out of the park as well as any point guard head coach in the country over the last several years. So that's a big loss. But it was a big loss when Schofield and those guys left, and Grant left, and it's a big loss when DK left, and it's a big loss when Zakai and Jordan and Lanier leave. And we'll be talking about the same thing 2 or 3 years from now. So that's just part of it. But certainly Zakai Zeigler, one of the all-time Tennessee greats. I don't think there's any question at all that he belongs in that conversation.
Jimmy, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at ESPN this week?
All right, Chase, thanks for having me on.
All right, we're back here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm now joined by Fox Sports Knoxville, Fan Run Radio's John Reed, the world traveler, John Reed. John, good morning, sir. How are you?
I am doing good. Happy to talk to you. As we were getting ready, I said I feel like when we talk, I am sick and either heading on a trip or coming back from a trip. And that is the case again today. So I'm glad you checked in with me this week.
How does this go on? I mean, for you, because you're a traveler. Like, what's your record? Are you keeping up with it in terms of how Tennessee is faring when you're making these treks?
The problem with going to every big game is that every loss hurts.
Mm-hmm.
But every win is good. So, I mean, the thing about going to the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight as a Tennessee fan is that the last couple of years I've gotten to experience one big win and then one soul-crushing loss. So that doesn't go well. Last football season I went to Georgia, loss, Columbus, beat down. But I was in Oklahoma. I was in Charlotte when we beat North Carolina State. I don't really consider North Carolina State a big game, but I would say for my career I'm batting probably about 40% on road games.
40%?
45% maybe. But the wins have been good. And, typically you're an underdog on the road. So, I feel like 40% is not a bad clip.
It's not bad. Like, that's not bad. But it's also like one of those where you're like, do I keep going? Like, is there a point in time where you're like, all right, I can't really, I need to take a break? Or is John Reed always going to be at these games?
I have made the mistake, Chase, of giving myself the moniker Big Game John. So I feel like I got to keep going to the big games. You won't really catch me inside Neyland Stadium for like a game against Troy or really even like South Carolina or Kentucky. Yeah, I'm good on that, but I'm going to be at every Alabama game, every Florida game. Kind of same for the road. You ask, is there a point? Yes, the point I will end is when I finally reach the so-called mountaintop. Like if I'd have been there for the Elite Eight win today, or last week on Sunday, I could have retired. I could have went out. I could have said, "Hey, I've done my job." If the Titans, for example, whenever I went to Kansas City for the AFC Championship, had we won that game, I could have said, "Hey, I'm done," but I'm going to keep chasing. I'm going to keep chasing that euphoria, because what if? That is the curse of a sports fan, is what if? What if I wouldn't have been in Indianapolis and we would have made the Final Four and I didn't get to be there to experience it after going to all these damn games for the last, 7 or 8 years. So hopefully eventually my watch will end and somebody else can pick it up. But for now, I'm going to keep chasing that dragon.
How are you doing the boots, man? I see your alligator boots. And as someone who is now I'm 34, I'm 33 going on 84 with like my bone spurs, and I got orthotics last week, John. It was a big time in the Thomas household where now walking evenly to relieve some knee pain. And I see your boots. That's the first thing I noticed when you post something, John. And I'm like, you could not torture me into going to a sporting event where I have to do a lot of walking in some boots. Like it's Hoka Central, man. I want to be a hospital shoe guy here from here on out because I'm in comfort. Like, is it comfortable? How do you do this? How do you move around in these shoes?
It's not comfortable at all. You just got to be a slave to the bit. I wanted to walk around telling everybody I had a rodeo in San Antonio to get to, since that's where the Final Four was. It worked great with Kentucky fans. They didn't really have a comeback for it. But no, I felt really dumb. But the problem isn't so much the walking around in the boots. It's when you get home and have to get them off, and then your feet are howling. Like, as long as they're own, I'm okay. It's the getting them off and then dealing with that afterwards that bothers me.
Goodness gracious, John! You take care of yourself, man. We're getting into veteran status here. Are you 30 yet? Are you in your 30s or no?
Am I 30 and I just turned 35, Chase, in March.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm an old man. Maybe I carry myself a little bit younger, going on all these road trips, acting like a guy in his mid-20s. But no, yeah, I'm a 90s baby, 1990 exactly. So yeah, I am. I turned 35 in March.
Well, happy late birthday, man. I turned 34 in April, so we're around the same age. But
happy early birthday. What day?
April 18th.
April 18th. All right, I'll make a note. I'll make sure to tell you happy birthday.
Well, get your taxes done first, and then the birthday, because it's a tax. That's my birthday present, is just a reminder of tax day. All right, awesome.
Mine's like, hey, March Madness. You're probably going to end up really sad here in a couple weeks, but you still keep chasing it. You do your taxes. You do your taxes, and I go to tournament games, which we've had a lot of under Rick Barnes. It's been nice, and. I feel bad for our brethren that just came up to Indianapolis for the Elite Eight game that, put it off, because Friday night was a lot of fun. I was glad to be in the building for beating Kentucky and one of, if not the biggest, basketball win we've had. That was great. Sunday, not so much. Felt kind of dumb driving back Sunday, but it would have felt a lot worse had you just gone up for one day.
I was talking to the Vols sports guys about that last night, of one of the things that sucks about the tournament in terms of advancing and over the weekend is that you don't get to really relish in the Kentucky win very long, and it'll be forgotten because the lasting memory is getting boat raced by Houston in the Elite Eight, and the Kentucky game was so good in so many different ways for Tennessee that you get not even 2 full days to really enjoy it. It's different than college football playoff. You win, you upset Ohio State in the CFP in that first round. You get some time here to enjoy it, a whole week of content, a whole week of feeling good, of there's a break in the action. I mean, even in the regular season, I mean, it's just one game at a time, and you beat Alabama and you're like, all right, I get to enjoy beating Alabama for a little while. I get to enjoy beating Florida for a while. You beat Kentucky in just really, really impressive fashion. And it's that's just lost to the ether. It doesn't matter.
It's very frustrating. I had that same conversation. It was the same way, last year in Detroit. You beat Creighton. Dalton Connect goes crazy. You go on that 19-0 run. It's one of the, the high marks in program history. And then, then you're just gutted, basically 36 hours later. And, I drove through the night on, Sunday, or drove through the evening. I got home at about 11, went to bed, woke up, was back in the Fan Run Studios, brought to you by White Claw Hard Seltzer. And I was like, man, I feel like I've been severed. I don't know if you watched Severance, but I feel like I had just left here Friday and just got back here completely sad and missed all the good stuff. And vibes were low, and we didn't really get to talk about the Kentucky game at all. It was all sad. End. Goodbye Zakai. Goodbye Jemai. Now what? And it's just crazy the way the tournament works that way.
What do you think was the most overlooked part of why Tennessee lost to Houston on Sunday?
When you say most overlooked, do you mean overlooked by us going into it or overlooked coming out of it?
If you have a different answer for both, I'll take both.
Well, I think going into it, and look, I'm not. This just is what it is. He's a Tennessee legend, but like going into it, I thought Zakai was going to be able to handle their guards and their length, and like obviously they kind of swallowed him up. And like when you actually saw it play out, you're kind of like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Like they got a bunch of length, and he's going to be bothered getting into the paint, and they're going to just have their way with him. That was something I think we kind of thought he was Superman, and was kind of going to rise to the occasion no matter what the obstacle was. I mean, you could have said similar things about Kentucky and their length and pretty much any SEC team, but Houston's a different level. That they've just got a whole bunch of switchable aliens out there, and Kelvin Sampson's a monster, and I like that program. And I hated that I was pitted against them in such a big game, but they're really, really good and really, really solid. As far as overlook coming out of it, I mean, that's a different question because I don't know what the conversation for others have necessarily been. When we lose big games like this, Chase, I kind of avoid everybody. I kind of live in my bubble and try not to read the sad stuff or try to see people freaking out about certain things. There's no new game to dissect. You know what I mean? So it's not like you need to learn any lessons from that game. It's over. I don't need to go break down the film and see why we lost or figure out why people think we lost because we lost. But in terms of, just my personal feelings coming out of that game, it's tough that your two guards that were so good just both, absolutely struggled. Lanier and Zakai couldn't do anything. I think I expected more from Okpara physically, but again, he's going up against a bunch of Bulldogs that could box him out, that had size and strength, and they kind of attacked the boards as a team. And really, now that we're talking about it, I do think I want to at least shout out. So maybe this is your question about being overlooked. I don't think we appreciated Jordan Gainey enough. Like Jordan Gainey, he didn't get the same goodbye as Zakai and Jemai because, of course, they're 4-year guys versus 2 years. He didn't get the same accolades as Chaz Lanier. But Jordan Gainey, I hope he gets treated like a Tennessee legend because I don't think Tennessee has the season they do this year or make the Elite Eight unless he takes the strides that he took. You know what I mean? Like he's a much better player this year than he was last year. And for him to do that and embrace kind of the sixth starter Lamonte Turner role of like, hey, yeah, I'm going to be off the bench first, but I'll get to close and I'll get my minutes. For him to embrace that and excel in it, and then also be the only one that brought his gun to the Elite Eight game. Like he brought it, he was ready, he was shooting every bullet going out. Like he wasn't afraid of the moment. He didn't miss his shots. He was there, ready to go toe to toe with them. For me, that's my biggest takeaway is like, shout out to him. He's a legend.
I think that's all fair. The Zakai thing, I mean, I think Ryan made this point last night of just like, I don't know if I've ever seen Zakai get his shot blocked that many times all year. Like that was just, he was getting swatted over and over again. And we put so much thought into Lamont Butler versus Zakai and like who would win that matchup because Lamont did give Zakai problems when he was available in the previous matchup with Zakai before he left the game. And there was so much focus on how Lamont versus Zakai would go, and Zakai won that battle, but you didn't really think about Houston's guards. And like you said, with the length and everything else, that the number one defense would give Zakai so many problems. And I think, I mean, we haven't even mentioned it. It's like the Tennessee in these big games, it's interesting because their two biggest losses down the stretch were to Barnes types teams, like Chris Beard on the road at Ole Miss, who played a very similar style to the way Tennessee did, and Houston's just a better version of Tennessee too. And those were the kind of big losses where we were so worried about the offensive driven teams, where it's like, can we keep up against a Mizzou or Kentucky or wherever if they're hitting shots, and like if Florida, like how do we survive with our offense? And you didn't think that like the way the season would end is like a team that's just basically a better version, better iteration of what you have. Like there's no shame in that. I think Tennessee maximized everything that they could possibly be in 2025. What's kind of always going to make me think of like the what if factor with this is like last year, I think they were the third best team in college basketball. They got unlucky with Purdue being in their Elite Eight matchup. And that I think Purdue and UConn were the only two teams that Tennessee could not have beaten last year. This year, I think they were somewhere in that top 8. Like, I don't know, you could tell me they were 5th best team in the country. You could tell me they're the 8th best, somewhere in there. They definitely weren't one of the 4 best. I mean, these are 4 historically good number 1 seeds that is in the tournament. It's all chalk. It doesn't happen very often for a reason. There's no shame in going down to Houston. They just needed a little bit of luck. They needed to avoid Purdue last year until the Final Four. This year, they needed to avoid just one seed. If they close at Ole Miss, they're a 1 seed. Like there's some stuff here where you're like, man, it's just the margin of error is so thin. And I just look at all this and we're like, this is great. I mean, Elite Eight, like this is exactly as far as Barnes should have gotten this team. Like they losing Cam Carr in the middle of the year, not having Estrella all year, being as thin as you were to extract everything that he did from this team. I don't know. I think this was a slightly worse team than last year, and he got him to the same spot in the Elite Eight. And it's fine. Like they didn't choke, they didn't have a bet. Like it's just they lost to a better team. It happens sometimes. They needed some non-chalk things to happen, and this was a chalk tournament.
I haven't seen really much anger about the result. Like, I mean, I think,
which is good. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Houston beat you, like, you just kind of have to tip your hat to them. You didn't lose to Kentucky, which would have been catastrophic. You didn't lose to some, upset. You didn't get upset. You didn't lose to your rival. You lost to a team that's kind of been a mirror image of you, a team that has a legendary coach and a team that, has a lot of dog athletes and they play hard. So, like, you can just tip your hat. Now, I do wish, for a couple things. Like, I do wonder what happens if we play in a basketball arena, because being there, like, the depth perception, the sight lines do feel like they were off for a lot of teams in the tournament. The shooting was bad in that, that regional invitational the entire weekend. And Chaz Lanier, I don't know. I mean, if I'm him, that's what I'm blaming, because it seems like he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn for most of really either game against Kentucky or Houston. But no, you're right. But it's just kind of funny. Like, we've had breaks in the past where things have opened up for us. And, we had a region where, we would have only had to beat, like, I think a 7 seed would have been the highest seed in 2018, but you lose to Loyola. You had an 8 seed in the Sweet 16 against FAU, and you lose that one. And we've blown some golden opportunities, but then, the 2 times that maybe we needed it to open up that we could have taken advantage of, we actually just get, like you said, the third best team or the second best team last year, and then, probably the second or third best team this year. I would have liked to have seen Dalton connect against Houston.
Yeah.
And that's no real flame to Lanier. Lanier was great. I just don't think he was Dalton connects, and he definitely didn't flip the same switch that Dalton flipped last year, right, in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. Like, Dalton, like I said about Gainey bringing his gun, like, Dalton brought grenades, a bazooka, and everything, and was ready to go. Like, he brought every weapon he had against Purdue, and they just couldn't stop Zach Edey. If you have Dalton Connect have that type of performance against Houston, you probably win. But instead, you just had your guards, like I said, just get swallowed up, and there's no like real one player to point to. It's just, hey, they're kind of better than you at everything, and they hit every big shot they needed to.
Yeah. What's your offseason wish list for Vols hoops?
It's simple. Like, I don't know if you want necessarily players. I do think, Jacoby Gillespie, probably by the time you get this podcast uploaded, will be a Vol from what I'm hearing. And, like, being told, like, it's not only, like, happening, but, like, it's very imminent. So, like, that, you got your guard. You got the Greenville, Tennessee kid, a guy that can come here and be a point guard. But I won't go down the exact list of players I want, as much as just, man, I hope, my wish is that the powers that be, whether it be Spire Sports, whether it be the new revenue sharing coming in September, whether it be Big Jim Haslam, who was in the locker room after the UCLA game, I hope they load up the money cannons and let Rick Barnes spend above maybe what we would any other year. Like put him above budget and let him actually go out and put a roster together for the next year, 2 or 3, however many we got Rick Barnes left for. I think he deserves to have every single opportunity and every single advantage to have as good of a team as possible, because I think he's earned it. So I hope we go out and buy a good roster, and I hope they find good fits, and I hope that we get some length and athleticism, and that we, are back kind of in the second weekend next year, rolling the dice, hoping to break through, because it would really bum me out if Barnes, his window ended on Sunday, right? It would really bum me out if, like, hey, Zakai and Jemai are gone, and now we're back to like, hey, 9-9 in the SEC, 10-8, 5 seed, 6 seed type of thing, and he doesn't necessarily have the talent.
I think he's out at that point. If it dips to that, I think he's out. I think
but that'd be very disappointing. Like, I don't want him to go out as a good run, time to retire, I ain't got it anymore. Like, I hope he's got another couple cracks. Like I said, just getting to the second weekend. But it's a risk,
right? Like, that's part of the deal. I mean, Bill Belichick didn't go out great in New England. I mean, you look across the sport, like, it's hard to go out the way having that storybook ending is not as common as you would like it to be.
No, sure, but like, just using the Bill Belichick example, Bill Belichick went out because Bill Belichick A, lost Tom Brady, but B, because like years of bad roster building and bad draft capital and like not knowing how to pick a wide receiver, that cost him. Like, hey, let's take N'Keal Harry over A.J. Brown. I'm a genius. I'm Bill Belichick. Like, that hurt him. Whereas I say Barnes has actually proven to me that he's pretty good at roster building. They've been pretty good at identifying portal guys that fit. And, he's evolved. He's just as good now as he's ever been in his career. So I do still think he has a couple good years at an elite level as a coach. But in today's game, Chase, I feel like you have to have the NIL backing to kind of make that happen. You're not the days of finding Dalton Connect for $200,000 and convincing him to come to school. The days of getting Chaz Lanier to take a big discount to come home to East Tennessee. Those are, fewer and far between now. So I think we just have to kind of up our budget, which I have been told that's the case. The numbers that I had thrown around to me was that 2 years ago, we had $2 million to spend for our roster. Last year, I heard it was $2.7-ish million. The way I'm being told now is that we're closer now to the $5.5 million range. So like, there has been a significant increase. So I hope, we're able to kind of land some difference makers. And like I said, just kind of reload and be right back here in the mix, giving Rick Barnes as many swings at the old Final Four pinata as we can.
And I think he needs, I think because of the House settlement that's looming, and that will, now it's April 1st as we're taping this, that could be decided here this month, is go all out with the NIL this cycle, because it could look very different here with revenue sharing going into effect, and we'll see how much that changes things. But I would just go overdo it here. If I'm Tennessee basketball right now, I'm overdoing it. I am just putting as much money into this final roster here before rev share as possible, and maybe that means Gillespie, McNeely, and a couple other guys. But I I think it's really interesting because there's going to be so much turnover, and I think Gillespie is a 2-year guy, because I think the 5-year rule will be in effect, not for Zakai and Jemai in time, but for guys like Gillespie, this will be year 4. But if the NCAA makes that 5-year rule, then you could have a really good point guard for 2 years here, veteran point guard, to kind of ease Henderson, the 3-star kid coming in here, let him grow, develop behind Gillespie here for a couple of years. It's a really good situation, because you were kind of wondering, okay, what's the post Zakai life? Because that's going to be the hardest transition for Rick Barnes, is that, yes, Jemai was great, Jordan Gainey were great, but it's just the heart and soul has been Zakai for 3 years now. I think there's been some revisionist history in terms of Zakai and Kennedy Chandler a little bit, where I'm Kennedy Chandler's first year at Tennessee, it's going to be lost forever, just how good Kennedy Chandler was as a true freshman for Tennessee. But an all-time great year. I wish we got more years of Kennedy Chandler and as a Vol.
But just real quick there, Chandler flipped the switch after Zakai kind of embarrassed him. Zakai was a great teammate. He was a great change of pace point guard. But I don't know if you remember, that Texas game. Yeah. Tennessee made a huge comeback in Austin and, almost overcame a like a 16, 17-point deficit really like in 6 minutes, and Chandler was on the bench for all of it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of Zakai leading the way. And if you go look at that line, that game, that's kind of the line of delineation for Chandler. He was a different player after that. So like I even give Zakai a little bit of credit for pushing Chandler, because Barnes was like, hey, you're not getting it done. This other guy's in here playing hard. And I think Zakai's the type of guy in practice and in games that elevates his teammates. And you'll definitely miss that. The hope is that the culture is firmly in place, though. Like I couldn't help but notice this past weekend, Chase, they kept talking about playing Tennessee basketball. Like, hey, this is what Tennessee basketball is. And I think that's a message to everyone moving forward who puts on the jersey. Like, these are the expectations. Whether or not Meshack and Zakai are here, the expectation for Rick Barnes Tennessee basketball is you are a grinder. You are hard-nosed. You're going to play defense, but you're also just going to go out there and just simply put, leave it all out on the court. Play as hard as you can.
I think that's why it's kind of sneaky how important it is that Cade doesn't enter the portal. Like, Cade is, I think, the kind of torchbearer, I think, for this next couple of years, where he's just kind of the prototypical Barnes, like, leave it all, like, do whatever is asked, super physical. I don't know. I think Cade is like one of those where you can't have that be an Awaka situation where you're like, well, he's like the third big. He's not like ever going to be the guy. Like next year, you still have potentially JP Estrella back and with a much expanded role. Felix Akpara, obviously at the starting five. Dwayne Brown's coming in from Hoover. I mean, it's going to be a deeper room inside, but you want to keep Cade because I think Bishop will see what his role looks like next year and how much he still feels more like a Barnes player than DeLeon did over the last 2 years, but still a big TBD on how he factors in next year, depending on especially how Tennessee approaches the portal. But I just think he's the guy who kind of probably leads this next group to keep the Barnes stuff going. I think he's quietly just the guy you have to have back. Like you can't let him into the portal.
To me, it's funny because I feel like we would have said similar things about Tobe Awaka last year, right? Like he was the guy down low that would just grab rebounds and play really hard and like was always out there playing as hard as he could. And of course, Tennessee was able to rebound without him. And then I also think we would have said the same about JP Estrella coming in and like battling Zach Edey. Like I remember that being a big narrative. It's like, oh my God, Estrella, Adu was scared of the moment, but man, Estrella almost gave us a chance to win that game. So I think with Akpara and Estrella there, that type of culture, at least for the big men, would be okay. I want to keep Cade Phillips, but whenever you lay it out like that, like we're going to have three bigs, and it's really hard to have three bigs and be a backup in the SEC when you feel like you've earned starter minutes and maybe
he can never
some
start
money
here. Like Tennessee's best version, he can never start.
No, and like that's. To me, I'm bracing to lose both him and Boswell. Like, and it's just kind of the reality of it. Now, maybe they both stay. Maybe one of them stays. I don't know, but I just feel like Boswell kind of got lost in the shuffle, and it's clear that they're prioritizing guards, to come in and replace him. They're not really using him as the placeholder for starter. And yeah, with Phillips, I feel like the staff likes Estrella more. I think Estrella's got a better chance of maybe being a stretch four and kind of fitting that Igor role, because I think Estrella does have better shooting touch and did in high school. But you
hustle and his motor.
Yeah, I think so. And if you talk to Bishop, like he's just a if he buys into the Jemai thing, where like just full defense program guy, and then see what happens. Like I don't know where Bishop's head's at. Like does he see himself as a 4-year guy at Tennessee and knows that if he puts in the time, he can be Jemai? Like, I think that's possible. I think if Bishop has the talent to be somebody like Jemai for Tennessee.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was a guy that had transferred down a level. My headphones just went dead, so apologies that my audio just absolutely went out.
Well, that's a good way of putting a bow on this, John Reed. That's the headphones telling us it's time to put a bow on us talking all things Tennessee hoops here. John, how do the good folks keep up with everything you and the good folks over there at Fox Sports Knoxville and Fan Run Radio are doing right now?
FanRunRadio.com. I'm on air every morning from 7 to 10 a.m. I'm on Twitter, JON2_Reed. Give me a shout. Give me a follow. Chase, always appreciate it. Always enjoy the conversation.
John Reed, keep up the great work, my friend, and we'll have to check back in again very soon.
I'll make sure I charge.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.